Hey everyone, I'm excited to contribute to our Sharing the Journey conversation for today. I'd like to share with you a little bit about the power of narrative to fuel our teaching and our preaching ministries. We live storied lives. Stories enable us to organize the seemingly random and meaningless data that we experience into a unified whole. Stories help us to make sense of the world despite its seeming senselessness. Another way of saying this is that humans tell stories because that is how we experience the world. Narrative not only reflects our fundamental experience of the world, it constitutes our selfhood. We narrate ourselves to others and to ourselves, and by and large, we become the stories we tell about ourselves. And the obverse is equally true. Others have the power to shape our self-perception through the ways they narrate our lives. With such power comes commensurate responsibility. The narrative frames within which we make sense of ourselves play a large part in determining our sense of self-worth and delimiting or expanding our capacities for imagining alternative ways of being and behaving in the world. Such narrative frames determine whether we find ourselves living out a comedy or a tragedy. To illustrate this, I want to focus on my favorite television show of all time, The Good Place. The show is as funny as it is incisive. It revolves around 4 characters who have died, and they are told they have accumulated enough points to enter the good place, when in actuality they're in the bad place. As the story unfolds, we discover that not only are the show's protagonists in a kind of perpetual hell, but they were strategically selected to live together for the ways they would make the afterlife miserable for one another. Sounds interesting, right? The premise for this show is what industry folks will call high concept. Here we have the makings of a story that is oozing with potential tension. It's ripe for popular engagement. The super sneaky thing about The Good Place is that the show stages conflict between its main characters and their afterlife environment as a way to explore the intricacies and complexities of moral philosophy. The show engages philosophers as diverse and abstruse as Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Nietzsche, David Hume, Aristotle, John Rawls, Philippa Foot, Soren Kierkegaard, Todd May, and Jean-Paul Sartre. Unbeknownst to casual viewers, they are learning to parse the philosophical nuances between deontology, utilitarian, and consequentialist ethics. They are wrestling with the overlaps and tensions between existentialism and nihilism, and learning to recognize the doctrine of double effect. Surreptitiously, The Good Place is an Ethics 101 course taught by Ted Danson, Kristen Bell, Jamila Jamil, and William Jackson Harper. Given the general sense of loathing that philosophical inquiry evokes in all but the nerdiest of us, this show has managed to draw in hundreds of millions of people to tune in week after week. The answer to how they're able to do this is simple: narrative drive. Narrative enables us to make sense of our experience. It helps us string together episodic moments to form a meaningful whole. It allows us to consider matters of life and death, and in this case, literally. As Aristotle first observed, narratives are powerful because they enable us to experience our emotional conflicts in our lives and move toward catharsis vicariously. So they serve as a kind of dress rehearsal for life. Preachers and church leaders can learn a lot from The Good Place. We are charged with this difficult task of engaging Scripture and life to draw our congregants and parishioners into God's story of love and redemption. Sure, we could tell people about biblical truths and theological concepts, but how much more powerful are these truths and concepts when they are revived with the powers of narrative? Show, don't tell is as important for storytellers as it is for preachers. Part of the beauty of narrative is its ability to absorb all types of characters into itself. Though none but the divine storyteller has access to the whole story, our common human experiences allow us to enter into God's story. And that is why narrative can become such a powerful vehicle for us to disseminate theological and spiritual truths. I hope that if you haven't seen The Good Place, you'll check it out. And I hope this little talk about narrative has helped you to think about how you can employ stories in your ministry. God bless.